Hey, Diane, what kind of day is it?
It's a new day.
It's a brand new day. Hey, we both have to work with people who are sometimes suffering and in pain.
Right.
What are some of the bad things you've heard people say to someone who's in pain?
I think one of the worst is like if someone is suffering that they know, they say something like, "Oh, that's not bad at all. You should have heard what happened to my great uncle on my dad's
They always
side."
have another story, right?
That's always
right?
worse.
Or how about, well, you're just going to have to get over it.
Oh, yeah.
That's
a
really
good one.
helpful, yeah.
Or at least it's not raining.
At least it's not raining.
Or snowing.
Could be worse.
It could be worse,
Or
far worse.
The worst ones, I think, are the ones that bring God into it. Heard those?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I might have actually used some of them sometimes. I'm embarrassed to say.
Yeah.
But
What have you heard?
I've heard, well, God doesn't give you more than you can
God,
bear.
so whatever it is you're suffering, it's obviously what God wants you to suffer.
God wants you to do, and He wouldn't give it to you.
And maybe my least favorite, the worst one for me is everything happens for a reason. That's right. So there's got to be a reason for whatever's going on. Makes absolutely no sense. Well, we are finishing up our binge reading the Bible series, and we are coming to the apocalyptic writings, probably the most misunderstood and the most controversial. It includes the last half of the book of Daniel primarily, some visions there, but mostly John's Revelation, the book of Revelation.
When you said apocalyptic, I was thinking, is that music with only a guitar?
Yeah, not a cappella,
okay,
apocalyptic.
there.
And really, it was their way of answering the question, why is there suffering in the world? So, you ready to go?
I am.
All right, let's get to it.
One of my favorite books to read to children, and it doesn't matter if it's at church or at home, is a wonderful book by Max Lucado called You Are Special. And in this book, there's this little wooden character. It's about a village of little wooden people called Wemmicks, I think. I've never heard it read aloud to me. But the little Wemmicks are all made of wood. And it's about specifically one little Wemmick named Punchinella. Now, in this little village, all the little Wemmicks walk around. And if one falls or stumbles or says something foolish or looks like they're dirty, all the other Wemmicks would run up and put a dot on them. And, so you fall in a mud puddle. Oops, you were clumsy. And then all the little Wemmicks would go and put little dots on you. Didn't make you feel better, but it pointed out you were not as good as others about that. And then pretty soon, sometimes if you would stumble, someone might put a dot on you. And then if someone else saw a dot, they'd put more dots on you because obviously you did something to deserve these dots. And they kept doing that. Well, there were the other Wemmicks that were very graceful and very intelligent and very clever. And people liked to put stars on these Wemmicks. They'd run up and put stars just to show how special these Wemmicks were. And of course, if you saw one star, others would be inclined to put other stars on him. And so poor Punchinella was having a horrible time because it didn't matter what day it was or what he did, everyone was giving him dots. And he was feeling very sad because no one wants dots all over them, not when dots mean that you're something less than good or less than special. Well, one day he met a friend, and this Wemmick had no dots or stars. She walked around with a huge smile on her face, and that made people want to run up and put stars on her. But the stars wouldn't stick, they'd fall off. And that confused them, and then some people tried to put dots just because stars wouldn't stick, and they didn't stick either. Punchinella watched this very special Wemmick for a while, and he finally got the courage and asked, why don't the stars stick to you? Why don't dots stick to you? And she said, come with me. And she took Punchinella to meet Eli the woodcarver. Now, Eli the woodcarver is the one who made all the Wemmicks. And he talked to Punchinello, and he spent time with him. And he took all the dots off of him, and he sanded and smoothed him. And his friend said, if you spend time with Eli every day, pretty soon it doesn't matter what other people think about you. Now, I always thought this was a great story about how God loves us even with our faults. Even if we're not the smartest, even if we're not the most attractive, even if we're not the most talented, God loves you. There isn't a level of performance you have to reach for God to love you. But I'm also thinking about, it's also a great book about hope. Because even in the worst possible times, those Wemmicks were loved by their Creator. Those Wemmicks did not face anything by themselves because they knew they had Eli to turn to. And just like in our darkest, darkest times, those storms that seem to go on forever, we are blessed to be loved by a Creator who loves us as we are. So in that hope, it allows us to get through those horrible, awful days and to every day wake up, because every day it is a new day.
As I said, we are looking at the apocalyptic literature in the Bible, mostly the last 5 chapters of Daniel and all of the book of Revelation. And so to kind of summarize this, I'm not going to go through all the intricacies of John's revelation. It's a vision that John had while supposedly he was being held in exile on the island of Patmos. And it's full of interesting pictures of beasts and evil and plagues and all kinds of curses. And our point today is not to get into the significance of all those things, but look at this genre of literature. So I'm going to read the second to the last chapter of Revelation, the 21st. Let's listen for God's word. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the old heaven and the old earth had disappeared, and the sea was also gone. And I saw the holy city, a new Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven like a bride beautifully dressed for her husband. I heard a loud shout from the throne saying, "Look, God's home is now among the people. He will live with them, and they will be his people. God will be with them. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and there will be no more death or sorrow or crying or pain. All these things are gone forever." And the one sitting at the throne said, "Look, I am making everything new." And then he said to me, "Write this down, for what I tell you is trustworthy and true." And he also said, "It is finished. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To all who are thirsty, I will give freely from the springs of the water of life. All who are victorious will inherit these blessings, and I will be their God, and they will be my children. But cowards, unbelievers, the corrupt, murderers, the immoral, those who practice witchcraft, idol worshippers, and all liars, their fate is in the fiery lake of burning sulfur. This is the second death." Then one of the 7 angels who held the 7 bowls containing the 7 last plagues came to me and said, "Come with me, and I will show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb." So he took me in the Spirit to a great high mountain and showed me the holy city, Jerusalem, descending out of heaven from God. It shone with the glory of God and sparkled like a precious stone, like jasper, as clear as crystal. The city was broad and high, with 12 gates guarded by 12 angels, and the names of the 12 tribes of Israel were written on the gates. There were 3 gates on each side, east, north, south, and west. The wall of the city had 12 foundation stones, and on them were written the names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. The angel who talked to me held in his hand a golden measuring stick to measure the city, its gates, and its wall. When he had measured it, he found it was a square as wide as it was long. In fact, its length and width and height were each 1,400 miles. Then he measured the walls and found them to be 216 feet thick, according to the human standard used by the angel. The wall was made of jasper, and the city was pure gold, as clear as glass. The wall of the city was built on a foundation of stones inlaid with 12 precious stones. The first was jasper, the second sapphire, the third agate, the fourth emerald, the fifth onyx, the sixth carnelian, the seventh chrysolite, the eighth beryl, the ninth topaz, the 10th chrysoprase, the 11th jacinth, the 12th amethyst. The 12 gates were made of pearls, each gate from a single pearl, and the main street was pure gold as clear as glass. I saw no temple in the city, for God Almighty and the Lamb are its temple. And the city has no need of sun or moon, for the glory of God illuminates the city, and the Lamb is its light. The nations will walk in its light, and the kings of the world will enter the city in all its glory. Its gates will never be closed at the end of day, because there is no night there. And all the nations will bring their glory and honor into the city. Nothing evil will be allowed to enter, nor anyone who practices shameful idolatry and dishonesty, but only those whose names are written in the Lamb's book of life. May God bless us with understanding for these words. So the question becomes, why do people suffer? Why is there evil in the world? This past week, as I was driving out to the Black Hills, I had downloaded a video of a debate, and I could listen to that in my car. And the debate was between an atheist philosopher and a Christian seminary professor. And the topic of the debate was, does the presence of suffering mean that there is no God? Well, they went at it, and first was the atheist philosopher, and he boiled down his argument to this kind of syllogism with 4 steps, okay? The first one is this. He said, if there were an all-powerful and all-good God, there would not be any evil in the world unless that evil is logically necessary for an adequate compensating good. Now, that's all philosophical gobbledygook, but here's really what he was saying is some of the things we would consider evil, and he used the example of going to the dentist and having the dentist drill into a cavity in your tooth. Obviously, that's painful, it's not good, could be considered evil, but it's done for a greater good. So, that kind of evil is okay. If you're trying to save your tooth, sometimes you have to sacrifice. And there are lots of ways that sometimes we have to sacrifice, sometimes we have to feel pain for a greater good. That's not the evil he was talking about. The second thing he said simply is this: there is some evil in the world. And then the third one is some of that evil is not logically necessary for any adequately compensating good. One example of that, about a decade ago, my niece was pregnant with her first child, and I got a call from my sister. The baby was born, but it had a congenital heart defect. The baby survived for 7 days, and then it died. There's no way to say that there's anything good coming out of that. All of the pain that came from that thing. So what the atheist philosopher is saying is there is evil that has no compensating good, and so his conclusion is simply this. If you go, therefore, there is no God who is all-powerful and all good. The presence of evil, he said, means that a God who's all good, who's all-powerful, if God could and God is good, then God would, that God must not exist. Well, then the seminary professor got up, and he began his part of the debate with 3 points, and he shared these. He said, the purpose of life is not human happiness as such, but knowing God. And what he was trying to say is, it's not God's job to keep us happy all the time, to make sure that our plans always work out, to make sure that we get maximum pleasure out of every day. That's not the point of life. The point of life is that we live in a relationship with God. Then he went on to this. He said, humans are in a state of rebellion against God and God's purpose. And what he's saying is, we basically don't like to follow the rules. And that probably includes most of us. We sort of chafe at the restrictions that might be put on us if we want to follow all of God's way. So, we're always not quite there with what God wants. And then he finally said this third thing. He said, God's purpose spills over into eternal life. And what he was trying to say at that point is this: we don't know the whole story. The whole story goes beyond our lives and into all of eternity. And since only God can see that, only God knows what is the purpose of whatever's happening in our lives. And if it does have a good purpose, we might not know it, but God does. And so he turned the atheist philosophy kind of on its head with this 3-point syllogism. He said this: if God exists, then gratuitous evil does not exist. And by gratuitous evil, he meant the kind of evil that doesn't have a compensating positive thing. Okay? The second thing he said is this: God exists. So the third simply comes this way: therefore, gratuitous evil does not exist. And we are sort of left with the following question. Here's the question that we have. How do we answer this? Does God not exist, or does evil not exist? Which one is it? Well, to understand this, we have to go back a little bit into our faith history, to understand how we've evolved with answers to questions like this. And I think to understand Jesus, we really need this kind of background. So you remember that back in the day, everybody thought the world was controlled by gods. And there were lots of gods out there. In fact, if you read the 10 Commandments, it doesn't say we can't believe in other gods. We just have to put one God, our God, as the priority God. Because what they believed back in the day was gods ruled certain areas of the world. In fact, if you moved someplace, the first thing you had to do was find out which God was in charge there, because you wanted to keep that God happy. Because if that God wasn't happy, terrible things could happen to you. And you kept God happy by making sacrifices to that God and by worshiping that God. Now, back in the day, gods couldn't necessarily be trusted. If you remember your classes in high school or maybe college about mythology, especially the Greek and Roman myths about all of the gods, it seems like the gods always were just kind of toying with people for their own pleasure. And so your job then was just try and stay small, stay out of God's way so you wouldn't get into any trouble. So the people thought that if they were faithful, God would bless them and everything would go well. So Moses gets the people out of slavery in Egypt. They wander the desert for 40 years. They cross over into the promised land. Now, there were other peoples already living there. And those other peoples had their own gods. How do you know which God is superior? Well, they went to war with them. There were the Canaanites and the Jebusites and the Hittites and all the other ites that lived around there. And if you read the story, the Jewish people came in and they defeated all of them and they took possession of the land they said that God has promised them. And they began to settle in and worship their God, and life went on. Well, you know how life is. Some days are good, some days are not so good. And how do you figure out, especially if there's something terrible going on, if there's a calamity, how do you figure out what the problem is? And in the Old Testament, that led to the prophets. Remember, we studied them. There were 16 prophets. They were speaking to the people. Their writings came at different times over different problems, but they all had one thing in common. They said the reason things were going bad is because the people weren't following God's way, and they were being punished for their sinfulness. And really, it was more than just punishment. God was trying to get their attention. I remember when my kids were young, they started playing basketball, and at one point or another in their lives, they all worked with the same basketball coach. And I remember he always said to every team he started, he would sit them down, and these are kids who are 12 and 13 years old, and he said to the kids, "Sometimes I'm going to yell at you. If I yell at you, it's not because I'm angry with you. It means I'm trying to get your attention." Some of the terrible things, there might be a drought that goes on for a few years, or there might be a horde of locusts that come in and eat the crops. And what the prophet said was, this was God trying to get the people's attention so that they would turn, the religious word is repent, and go the right way again. And if you missed the first one, there would be a second one, and oftentimes these prophets were predicting terrible calamities, not because they knew what was coming, but because they knew how the people were behaving. And this went along for 400 or 500 years, this kind of belief system. Then came the Babylonians with Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar came in and destroyed Jerusalem. He tore down the walls, but more important, Solomon's temple, this beautiful building they had built to the glory of God, where they believed the only true God lived, was torn completely down. It was destroyed. Why would God do that? And here's the other thing they said. They said, we might not have been we weren't that bad. This is a little over the top, God. Why are you punishing us this hard? And not only that, not everybody was bad. How come everybody's being punished? Because when Nebuchadnezzar came in, he took all of their leaders, all their leadership, all the leading people, and he took them into captivity back to Babylon. The way he functioned was, he figured if he could get the leaders to become Babylonians, to learn to live like he did, then he could send them back and they would lead the rest of the people, and they become like they were citizens of Babylon, and he cut down on the rebellion, and it worked for him for a long, long time, except with the Jews. Because the Jews a long time ago had made a covenant with their God. It wasn't a God who was in control of a certain area, but their God was the God in control of the whole world. And they had agreed to be God's people. And that came with certain responsibilities on how they should live. So when Nebuchadnezzar asked them to live differently, they refused. They wouldn't do it. Now remember, the prophet said, if you're faithful, you will have success. You will be blessed. And from that time, we read the first 6 chapters, I think it is, of the book of Daniel. And these are fables about Jews who lived in Babylon during that time. And they're familiar stories. Remember, there was Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And they refused to bow down to the king, so they were told they would be thrown into a fiery furnace where they would be burned to a crisp. They refused to change their ways. They were thrown into the fire, but God's angel came and protected them, and the next morning they were still good. Daniel himself had become an advisor to the king, but the king found out that he was practicing his Jewish faith, and so there wasn't anything to do but throw him in the lion's den, remember? And so all night he's there in the lion's den, and the lions are roaring, and the lions are hungry, and they should have eaten him up. But in the morning, there was Daniel, still there. It hadn't worked. Faithfulness still equals success, except the people had been faithful, some of them, and still they were suffering. So how do you answer that? And from there, the book of Job came out, and Job was a parable about a guy who was all kinds of faithful, had all kinds of success, and then all kinds of tragedy befell him, and he couldn't figure out, and it was a test to see if he would renounce God, and he didn't, and at the end, everything was restored, but Job never found out why. It was a parable to say that this idea that God simply rewards good people and punishes bad people really doesn't work in the real world. So the question is, why is it that sometimes the poor and the oppressed, sometimes faithful people suffer? In fact, furthermore, Why is it that sometimes people suffer because they are faithful? Well, again, Nebuchadnezzar was bad, but after him came one that was worse. The Greeks finally conquered the Babylonians, and the Seleucid Empire came down under Antiochus the Great, and then his son, Antiochus IV, or better known as Antiochus Epiphanes, took over the area of Palestine. And one of his goals was to make everybody Greek. Like Nebuchadnezzar wanted to make everybody Babylonian. Well, he didn't take people into captivity. He just forced the people where they were to start acting like they were Greek. And Antiochus was awful. You can read about this in the book of the Maccabees. It's in the Apocrypha. 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th Maccabees tell the story. Antiochus IV ruled from about 175 to about 164 before the Common Era. And during that time, there were this family called the Maccabees. There were 7 brothers, and they were the leaders of the community, and they were called in to try and turn them into Greeks. And one of the ways they did that, one of the sticking points between Jews and everybody else, was the eating of pork. Jews had been told by God they couldn't eat pork. No bacon for them. And so here's Antiochus trying to get the Maccabee brothers to eat some pork in front of everybody so that everyone would see it's okay to be Greek, and maybe he could convert the people. But they refused. So Antiochus took the first, and he's got his whole family watching, and he began to torture him. You can read this in the book, they took a huge pan and put it over a large fire and let it heat until it was red hot. And then the Maccabees were told they had to eat pork, and he refused. So Antiochus first had his tongue cut out, then had him scalped, then had his hands cut off, then his feet cut off, and then he was thrown into this fire where he was burned to death, where he was fried to death. And then the second one was tortured, and the third one was tortured, and even the fourth one was tortured. But none of them gave up their faith. And in the end, the remaining Maccabees started a revolt that defeated Antiochus Epiphanes' armies, and Israel was politically free. They were a free nation for almost 100 years, and then Rome came, about the year 64. And Israel would not be a free nation again until 1948. That whole time, there's no political freedom. And 65 years after Rome took over, Jesus was born. Well, we're back to that old question. Is it evil that does not exist, or God that does not exist? And how do you answer the question? Well, a new kind of philosophy emerged. We call it apocalyptic thinking, and there are a couple of terms that I think you should know. All right? The first one is eschatology. And what eschatology really means is a discussion of the end of times. Now, it's not a particular way time is going to end. There are lots of different eschatologies, and for some it's the world, and for some it's life. You know, my mom was put into hospice, so we've been talking with her about the end of her life. That's her eschatological discussion, eschatology. Apocalyptic is a particular form, apocalypticism, particular form of eschatology, and it has some very specific characteristics. Okay? The first one is this. It's called dualism. Before this, everybody believed that there was one God, one power in the universe. God was all good, and God was in control. Well, maybe there's an evil force out there too. Apocalypticists believe that there's a force called evil. Now, some people think that they developed this philosophy after they'd been taken in captivity by Nebuchadnezzar, because they were taken back to Babylon, where they came in contact with a religious faith called Zoroastrianism. It still exists today, but it is the first religious faith to put out the idea that there are two competing supernatural forces. they called their gods Ahura Mazda and Angra Mainyu. Ahura Mazda was good, Angra Mainyu was bad, and they were battling it out in the cosmos, but that battle took place here on earth with the good stuff and the bad stuff. Well, the Jews and later the Christians took that over, and all of a sudden we see the concept of the devil or Satan. You know, in the Old Testament, Satan was not an enemy of God. Satan was God's buddy if you read the book of Job. By the time Jesus comes along, Satan was the sworn enemy. Satan was the producer of all evil. So, in apocalyptic thinking, there are two forces, one good, one bad, and they're in battle with each other. The second characteristic is pessimism. Things are bad, and they're going to get worse. And why is that? For some unknown reason, God has allowed the evil force to reign in our world. You still hear this from some people today, that there's an evil force in charge of our world. And so not only are things bad, but they are going to get worse until one day God will come in and take over. God will come in and defeat the devil or Satan or whatever you want to call the evil force, and then there will be a new element, a new reign, a new era. That's the other thing, is that they believe there are two different eras. There's the current time now, but more importantly, there's a time to come. And if you read the Gospels, if you read Jesus' teachings, that's what he talked about. He talked about the kingdom that is coming. Later, we switch that around to talk about the kingdom of God as if it's some kind of place way off where we go after we die, but that's not what Jesus taught. He said there's a new era that's coming. In fact, it is breaking in upon us right now, and we can become part of that because the forces of good are about to take over. And the next thing is simply this. The next term is vindication. What that means is that you will be vindicated for all the suffering that you've had to go through. If you've been hurt because of your faith, all of that will come back. And you read that in this book of Revelation. You know, when I was growing up, here's what I was kind of taught. That human beings are sort of made up of two parts, right? There's the outer physical self, and then there's the inward spirit or soul that is a separate living thing. That isn't supported in the Bible. Is it true? I don't know. I just know it's not in the Bible. That actually comes from Plato and Socrates. And what I was taught when I was growing up is when a person dies, their spirit goes someplace else. Usually we talk about people going to heaven. We hardly ever talk about them going to the other place, do we? In Jesus' time, they thought when you died, you died. And vindication didn't come until the new kingdom came. In fact, if you read Revelation, it says that until Jesus returns, everyone is dead. When Jesus returns, the evil one will be bound for 1,000 years. There will be a reign of peace, and all of the martyrs, those who've been killed for their faith, will be raised up. They get this special treat of reigning with God for 1,000 years. After that 1,000 years, the evil one, the beast, whatever you want to call him, will be let loose, and they'll become the final battle. They call it the Battle of Armageddon. And in that battle, God will finally destroy evil. Then will come in the kingdom, and everybody will be raised, but you have to go through judgment. The other thing is, I was kind of taught that the bad people got tortured forever. That's not supported by the Bible either. What the Bible says is the good people get raised into the new kingdom. The bad people just stay dead. They just stay dead. And finally, the last thing is this, and it's imminence. And it's said that these things are going to happen very soon. It's not going to be long, and if you read Jesus' teaching in the Gospels, when he's teaching about the end of time, he says these things will take place before this generation, he was talking to the people who were there, have all passed away. He said it was going to be within the next few years. Well, so this kind of writing brings changes to our understanding All right? The first change is simply this. The change is the expectation of the Messiah. Before Jesus, they thought the Messiah would be a political ruler who would raise a great army to throw off their oppressors, would at least lead the people out of the oppression as Moses had taken the people out of Egypt, but they would be in the promised land, so it was thought that Jesus would have an army, maybe an army of angels who would drive Rome out and they would be free again. Well, now the Messiah comes as a suffering servant. And it's not about political freedom. In fact, when Jesus was asked about that, he said specifically, they asked, "Is now the time you'll restore the kingdom?" And they meant the nation of Israel. And his response was, "My kingdom is not of this world." Now all of a sudden, instead of talking about national salvation, it becomes individual salvation. The second thing is about this, the kingdom of heaven. We like to think that that's someplace out there, but Jesus, when he was talking about it, was saying this is a new age in which nothing bad will be allowed in, a new age where there'll be peace, where there won't be any suffering, and we read it, there'll be no more tears, no more pain, no more sickness, no more sorrow. It will be a time of great joy. Not a place where you go off in the clouds, but a new era that we get to live and be part of. The third thing is this, it's a difference in the expectations of God. No longer is God seen as punishing people who haven't behaved appropriately. No. God understands the pain we're going through. That pain is for a greater good, and God is on our side and will, through God's time, bring this thing about. And then finally, it is simply this, the expectations of life. No longer is God's purpose to make our life fair or easy or successful. Life is not fair, and we have to get used to it and learn how to live with it, because that's the last thing. How will we live with this knowledge that life is not fair? Jesus came and lived in a way that said, God is not going to make your life easy or maybe even pleasurable, but there is a God who has the power to walk through this with you. So it's not about making our life easy, it's about giving us the strength to get through the storm. So where are we in the end of all this? Whew. Well, I think it's easiest summed up in my favorite philosopher, theologian, John Lennon, my favorite Beatle. And at one point he said this, in the end, everything will be okay. If it's not okay, then it's not yet the end. How do we get through these days of trial and tribulation? It's trusting that God is walking with us. In the end, everything will be okay. I don't know how it'll be made okay. I don't know when it will be made okay. But I trust that there's a God who will make it okay. And so, if life isn't okay right now, and who among us doesn't have pain at this point, God calls us together to love each other, to hold on to each other until that new age comes. Apocalyptic thinking. Apocalypse, we like to think it's about the end of time, but the word actually means an unveiling or a revealing, a truth of who God is. God is not the one who makes our life good, who makes sure the sun is shining and the wind never blows. God is the one who, when we come into our storms, is there to walk with us until we get to the other side. Let's pray. God, we thank you that you are always with us, that even when we feel weak and alone, your strength can sustain us. Give us that trust, O God, that you're always there, that you always will be there, that we might find hope even in our hardest times. We pray that in Jesus' name. Amen. Now I invite you one more time again to say our NewDay Creed with me. Would you read along? It's not about me. I give myself freely and totally to God. that I may be used for the building of God's kingdom, for the care of God's world, to love God's children, all of God's children, even those who are not like me, even those who do not like me, that God's kingdom might become real, and I might be blessed, be made complete. Well, I know that life is hard, and we have a church because we want to help. If you're struggling, we'd love to hear from you, or if you're not. We still worship at 10 o'clock outside. We'd invite you to come be part of that. But until we can meet again, my prayer for you is not that God will take away the storms, but God will be there to walk you through them. Until then, may God's blessing be with you all. Amen.